Hello, I'm Father Michael Kapperman, the parochial vicar here at Sacred Heart, and this is the third part of our four-part series, Unpacking the USCCB document, Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship. In the last two parts of this video series, we unpacked two questions that the bishops asked in this document of why does the church teach about issues affecting public policy and who should participate in political life. In this third video series, we're unpacking the question of how does the church help the Catholic faithful speak about political and social questions. So how is it that the bishops want to help us to be able to engage in political life? And there's four ways that the church helps us. There's four ways that the church wants to help us to engage in political life. The first way is by helping us to have well-formed consciences. A conscience is our judgment of reason, whereby we recognize the moral quality of the actions that we are performing. So our conscience helps us to know what is good and what is bad. When do we make an action and when shouldn't we? Now, a conscience can also be malformed. It can tell us to do something when we think is good when it's actually bad, or vice versa. Now, how do we have a well-formed conscience? Well, the bishops show us that there's three ways. First, we must conform our consciences to divine truth handed on to us by sacred scripture and the teachings found in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. The second way that we conform our consciences is by knowing the facts about the given situation, the given public policies that we're voting on. And the third way we can have a well-formed conscience is by prayer, by engaging in the life of prayer, by allowing the light of prayer to enlighten our minds. And so the first way that the church wants to help us to engage in political life is by helping us to have well-formed consciences. The second way the church helps us is in the virtue of prudence. Now, the virtue of prudence helps us to discern the true and the good in every circumstance and the means to obtain the good. So not only is it about knowing the good, the virtue of prudence helps us to know how do we get to the good. Because we can never choose an evil means to get to a good end. We can never have a morally unjust means to obtain a good end. So prudence helps us to get to the good we desire by living life in a good way, in a good manner. The third way that the church helps us to engage in political life is by helping us to understand goodness and evil. Now, there are some actions that are what the church calls intrinsically evil actions. So these are actions that in every circumstance, everywhere around the world, and in all times, are unjustifiable actions. So the example the church uses in this document is the action of abortion. In abortion, there is a direct attack against an innocent human life. And so that is always and everywhere an intrinsically evil act. Now, the church not only teaches about what are intrinsically evil actions, but it also, from the intrinsically evil actions, we start to actually understand what is the good. So from the action of abortion, we start to understand that, well, in every circumstance, all humans have human dignity, such that from conception until death, all humans should be treated with human dignity. And so from an evil action, we actually start to understand the good that we should strive for. And so another thing about doing good and avoiding evil is that there's two temptations. The first temptation is to put all actions on the same moral level, right? So to use an example, say you have the moral action of abortion, and you have the moral action of promoting unjust taxation laws. Now, the temptation would be put them as the same moral level. But the church affirms that there's actually distinctions, that it's actually a greater offense to commit the action of abortion than to promote an unjust taxation law. So the church in this first way is helping us to recognize that there are moral differences in actions. But this moral differences can lead us to the second temptation, in which when we recognize a greater evil, we forget about the lesser evil. That in our zeal to end abortion, that we can sometimes forget that there's other issues that also need to be fought for. And so we want to avoid the two temptations of making everything the same moral action, and we want to avoid the temptation of forgetting about trying to promote policies that also get rid of lesser evils as well. So that is the third way that the church helps us to speak in political life, by helping us to understand goodness and evil. And the fourth and final way that the church helps us to engage in political life is by helping us to make moral choices, such that as Catholics we should always oppose laws and policies that promote intrinsically evil action. That as a Catholic we always oppose intrinsically evil laws and policies. And that as Catholics we should never vote for a politician who promotes these intrinsically evil actions because they promote these intrinsically evil actions. Another way that the church helps us to make moral choices is by helping us to understand that, say you have two candidates who are both promoting an intrinsically evil action. How do we vote? How do we vote when both candidates are promoting intrinsically evil actions? Well, the church helps us to see that in some circumstances we can vote for a third-party candidate, but then there's also a circumstance where when you look at these two, look at the two candidates, you ask the question, which one will promote greater good and which one's promotion of the intrinsically evil action will be lesser? And so if you have two candidates, which one is going to bring about the greater good and which one's support of intrinsically evil action will bring about lesser evil? Now, with these moral choices, the church also teaches us that our salvation, our chance of getting to heaven, is also dependent upon how we vote. Because we vote as public persons, we vote as Christians. And if I'm supporting something intrinsically evil in my voting, what I'm doing is I'm actually going against Christ's mission of redeeming all things, even the political life. And so, brothers and sisters, these are the four ways that the church helps us to engage in political life. By helping us to have a well-formed conscience, by helping us to grow in the virtue of prudence, by helping us to understand goodness and evil, and by finally helping us to impact how do we make moral choices. And so thank you once again for listening. Stay tuned for our final part of this four-part series. And also I want to encourage you to continue reading this document, that there's so much goodness in this document. And then finally on October 18th from 4 to 5 p.m., we will be having a chance just to discuss this document. And so brothers and sisters, continue to pray for our country, continue to pray that as we draw closer to election day, that we may be docile instruments of the Lord and that the Lord's will may be done in our country.